And he told me something that changed my life forever, in that he said, if you really want to get good at boxing, you should start doing Tai Chi and meditation. And at the time, I was this young kid who thought Tai Chi was for old people in the park. And how is this going to help me? And just turned my whole career path around. It changed so many things in my life. And through the years, I've had thousands of students come through the academy, and I've seen it positively influence hundreds of lives. And that's kind of why I've been so passionate about writing these last couple books and creating this online program.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Today we're joined by Jeff Patterson, who has over 36 years of experience practicing and teaching the meditative and martial arts. He's the founder of Northwest Fighting Arts, Portland Tai Chi Academy, where he emphasizes the transformative power of the meditative and martial arts practices, particularly the yielding concept. He's published 2 books and hundreds of instructional videos. He's the founder of the Yielding Warrior online program and has worked with thousands of students from around the world. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Good. I'm just curious, what came first, meditation or martial arts?
I was introduced to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. So when I was a younger guy, I was really into Western boxing. And I love the intensity, the thrill, the challenge. And there was so much about it that was just kind of a driving force. I used to go to the boxing gym 5 or 6 days a week, and I just love the art behind it. And I used to go to this boxing gym that was just a few blocks here from my academy now. And at the time, back in the late 80s and early 90s, this was really the only boxing gym in the whole Portland metro area. And all of like the amateurs and professionals that were in town and that would come through town would go there to train. Well, at a boxing gym, they run things a lot different than your traditional fitness style classes, and that, usually in a fitness class, there's a teacher and, 20 or 30 students, and they all kind of follow along. Well, in a boxing gym, usually there's anywhere between 4 to 6 coaches at any one time if it's a busy gym, and each one of those coaches might have 3 or 4 fighters that they're working with. Well, the gym that I was training at had one coach who was a very well-known, respected coach. He had created national and world champion level fighters, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and train hard, show him that I was disciplined, and do my best to kind of get his attention. And after about 3 or 4 months of doing this, he finally started showing me some stuff and giving me some advice and kind of taking me under his wing a little bit. Well, it was only about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to spend some time with him. And he told me something that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to get good at boxing, you should start doing Tai Chi and meditation. And at the time, I was this young kid who thought Tai Chi was for old people in the park. And how is this going to help me? And it just turned my whole career path around. It changed so many things in my life. And through the years, I've had thousands of students come through the academy, and I've seen it positively influence hundreds of lives. And that's kind of why I've been so passionate about writing these last couple books and creating this online program, and just seeing if we can touch more lives with the practice.
So you've got this big, tough boxing coach who's coaching national and world champion boxers, and he tells you to start meditating and go and grab a stick and go down the park and do Tai Chi moves with like old Japanese people or something like that. That's what I'm picturing here. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not
So
telling you to pick up your uppercut or your jab or anything like that.
he was definitely helping me with my boxing skills as well, but he was trying to get me to elevate my awareness and my mindset and my sensitivity through the meditative arts. Because when I was young, I was, you know, kind of stiff and, not real in tune with my body. And so this really helped me kind of reach that next level of awareness. And this is why so many professional athletes today in basketball and football and, any sport you could look at are practicing the meditative arts because there are so many benefits that help them get to that next level of play.
Yeah. And so I guess to answer my question, which came first, meditation or martial arts? So with him suggesting Tai Chi, is that when you started martial arts?
Well, no, I was doing martial arts for about 3 or 4 years prior to that when, doing boxing, doing kickboxing, I was doing Kempo. I had been into that for a little while, and then when he directed me towards the, meditation and Tai Chi, that kinda got me onto the meditative and the internal art path.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, interesting. And early, right at the beginning there, you used the words boxing and art in the same sentence together. I've never thought of boxing as an art.
Yes. So I kind of categorize any martial art in the like Western boxing, Muay Thai kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, scream, anything that has a martial element to it could be turned into that broader category of martial arts.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and boxing is, I'll be honest, is never something that's really turned me on. I did karate with my three boys when I was, many, many years ago, just to be a good dad, take them along to the karate thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never sort of been that much. And I've got a guy I've interviewed on the podcast here, and he's in Australia, and he's got a couple of boxing world records, not from fighting people, but like I think one of them, and I'll get it a bit wrong here, he punched a punching bag for 25 hours straight, nonstop. Like so they gave
Yeah.
him a yeah. I mean, he didn't stop to take a leak.
Yeah.
Like his wife came with a bucket and put a blanket around him. He did not stop boxing for punching that bag for 25 hours, things like that. So he would probably enjoy listening to this one. He's into, and he does. I think he's doing boxing coaching right now. We spoke couple of weeks ago, and I'm disappointed in myself that I waited until yesterday to get right into your website and start looking at your stuff, because I noticed on there you have one of your books that people can download. And usually at the end of the podcast, I would sort of mention something like this, but I'm going to bring it up right now. That book's like, it's well over 200 pages, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact amount. I think it's maybe
Oh,
350-ish pages,
yeah.
something like that.
And now, people listening, this is a free giveaway book. I read probably 15 pages in the beginning of it, and then I skipped forward into the first chapter and read another half a dozen pages. And I'm like, did you like? I got to ask you, did you have help of a ghostwriter writing that?
I wrote the book, but I did have editing help.
Yeah, it's extremely well written and extremely informative. And it's not, I'll be honest, to me, it's not a free giveaway book. This is like a book you go on Amazon, pay 25 bucks for and get it. Like if you're listening, you need this book. It's The Yielding Warrior, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And Jeff's given it away on his website for free, a free PDF download. It's really well written. I've read free ebooks before, and they're 40 or 50 pages, and they're nice, but they're not written at the level and the caliber of this book. And the story that's in it, it reminded me, I just got to look at my notes here. It reminded me of a ebook I've listened to, and you may think this book was a load of rubbish if you've heard of it, or you may think it's quite good. I don't know. The Art of Learning by Josh, I can't even pronounce his last name, Waitzkin. Have you ever heard of him at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I read that book. Yes.
Yeah. And so, and first part, it talks about his chess career and his teenage, his pre-teens and teen years. And then he went into Tai Chi, was it?
Yeah, he did Tai Chi and also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Because it's probably been a year or more since I've listened to that. Yeah. You talking about yielding in your book, about, 'cause it's, it's not, I'll be honest, to me, it's not a free giveaway book. This is a free PDF download. It's really well written. I read probably about 15 pages in the beginning of it, and then I skipped forward into the first chapter and read another half a dozen pages. And I'm like, did you like, I got to ask you, there's only 1 in 1,000 people will get it. And out of those, that one person, another. So it's literally turns up like 1 in 1 million people will really understand what you're talking about in the book with yielding. And so it just took me back to what he wrote. And do you think how, like his mind process and how he talks about how he trained and that sort of thing, that he gets it with the yielding?
I think anybody that gets push hands to a high level can reach a certain stage in yielding. As far as understanding all aspects of yielding, I don't know that from reading his book. Within yielding, there's the three different directions of yielding. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. And physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's a bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. I'm strategically learning how to redirect that energy so I can get to the outcome that I want to achieve with the least amount of force. And this is invaluable in any kind of combat martial art or any kind of athletics where you have any kind of physical contact. And now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed. The breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may take years and years to get to a high level of this, from day one, by incorporating the meditative arts into your life, you can learn how to be more in tune with yourself and more aware of what's going on inside yourself, which allows you to see things and be more in tune with what's going on in other people. And this is where we move into what I call mental yielding. And mental yielding, say, for example, you and I are having a conversation and I say something that unsettles you. If I'm in tune and I pick up on it right from the beginning, it's easy for me to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place. And if I'm not paying attention to that, pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. Learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is a very powerful concept. One, in that you're just being considerate, which is a good thing I think we could all do more of. And two, it allows you to be strategic in your interactions. And this is very powerful in business, in negotiations, in sales. There's so many different ways that we can apply this strategy to get to that positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And then again, that is what I call mental yielding. And then the next kind of yielding is emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but with your own interpersonal conflicts. It's say, for example, something happens to you and you respond and you go down this path. You might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding, if we could have taken a step back and we have that heightened awareness and we can see things as soon as there's that imbalance, we can make a more educated decision and maybe have a better approach that saves us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining these meditative arts to people or the yielding concept to people for years. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is that, that makes a lot of sense. I use yielding all the time. And while I would agree that I think everybody uses yielding to some degree all the time once they realize what it is they're doing, it's kind of like, if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about that crime scene and the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And I feel like without a meditative practice in your life, there's things that are going on inside yourself and your awareness and the way that you can perceive things in other people can never be as heightened and as aware as they could as if you had a meditative practice.
And I'm curious there when you're talking about meditation, because for me, with men who are wanting to develop their intuition, to me, a meditation practice is central to it. It's one of the key things that you should practice and adopt, because I believe it will help develop your intuition. So when you meditate, I'm curious how you do it, how you teach it. Do you just teach people to go within? Do you suggest in the beginning they try guided meditations? Like what's your advice there?
So it's best to have an kind of an aerial view of what the developing a meditative practice should look like. And first thing you want to think about is the three different modalities of the practice. And we have what I call ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. Ritual practice is where you set time aside and you do 20 minutes a day of a meditative practice. And in that ritual practice, it could be a sitting practice, it could be a standing meditation, a movement meditation like Tai Chi or Qigong. It could be anything that you do on a regular basis and are consistent with. Now, what I would recommend when you're doing this is it's okay to learn these things on a video or listen to an audio to learn a specific practice, but they're called the internal arts for a reason, meaning when you're doing your ritual practice, it's not the best to be watching a video and following along or listening to an audio and following along, because it's meant to turn your awareness inside and listen on a deeper level of what's going on inside yourself. And so that would be an idea of a ritual practice. Then there's active practices, and these are things that you can do when you're walking down the street or sitting in your car at a red light. They're things that we integrate throughout the day, and they can be as simple as counting out 10 breaths, or maybe doing some spinal rotations, or maybe doing a simple movement exercise for 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And they're just a way that we can reconnect with our body and our awareness and our mental state, and build that kind of lifestyle into everything you do. And by incorporating these active practices, it helps deepen our ritual practices as time goes on. And then the next thing would be the philosophical practices. And these can be things that we integrate in either a ritual or an active style of practice.
So your recommendation there is that people from the beginning go within themselves. And I guess for me, I used to have tell myself stories in my head. My mind would wander. I'd be thinking about what we're going to have for dinner and things like that. So I did then try a few guided meditations, and I did get hooked on them for a few years. I just yeah, but I do know what you mean. Like, a couple of hours ago when I got up, I jumped on for 20 minutes and just closed my eyes and just sat there, and off I went. And yeah, definitely messages start to come through, and if I'm hearing things, then they're very informative and helpful. Rather, yeah, but it's like anything, I guess, with martial arts, it takes practice and that sort of thing. So
I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the most common things that I'll hear people say is that they tried meditation and it just didn't work for them because they couldn't quiet their mind. Somewhere along the way, there was this misconception that in order to do meditation, you have to quiet the mind. And this is so not the case. I've met some very advanced, high level meditation practitioners in my career, and I've never once met anybody that can sit and meditate and not get distracted. And that's not the ultimate goal with the practice. The idea is whether we're doing a sitting practice or a standing practice or a movement practice, if you're doing that for, say, 20 minutes, and during that 20-minute time, you get distracted, say, 50 or 60 times during that session. Every time you get distracted, your awareness is in tune, you're paying attention to the imbalance. You bring your awareness back to your breath, back to your posture, back to your movement, and then you come back to center and you let that distraction go. Now, you just got 50 or 60 repetitions of being distracted and coming back to focus. And if you do that every day for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you start getting so in tune and so aware of these imbalances that it's easy once you sense that distraction to come back to center. A lot of people, they'll get that distraction and it'll lead to another and another and another, and then they're distracted for the next 10 minutes. The meditation practice helps you learn how to not let that avalanche stop, but to pick up the pebble as soon as you drop it. And that way, never have much struggle trying to let go of all of that negativity down any one of those distracting paths.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, like for years I was using guided meditations to like escape from my body. But now I've found that if I go within, concentrate on my breath, and then I also concentrate on the parts of my physical body that are touching the seat, like my buttocks, my back, my arms, my thighs. I'm now concentrating on my physical body. And I find doing that helps take me off into a very relaxed state and clears my mind and that sort of thing. So I'm there trying to escape from my body, but using my body helps me get where I want to go. It's like coming back and thinking, oh, my body is actually helpful in this process. Something I wanted to ask you about, you talk in your literature about understanding the five regulations, like leading to a healthier life. How does that work?
So, with any meditation practice, we have the five regulations, and it is regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. Regulating the body is usually the first one that we start with because it's the easiest one to accomplish. And it's basically just your overall posture and how you carry yourself through movement, walking throughout the day, when you're sitting. If you think about there was a time maybe where you're sitting at your computer for 4 or 5 hours and you start hunching over and maybe get a sore neck and you start feeling very depleted. This is an example of how our posture can affect our energetic state and make us very drained. Whereas think about another time where maybe the most important person in your world walks into the room and you perk up and your body's erect and you're excited and you're ready to go and your overall energetic state changes just from the way that you're holding your posture. And this simple thing of just taking 2 or 3 months to really focus on your posture and all your activities and everything that you do can have a big influence on your overall energetic, mental, and emotional state throughout the day. Then there's regulating the breath. Regulating the breath is a lot deeper than the body. And it's a lifetime journey and practice towards regulating the breath. Oftentimes they refer to Qigong as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies and different ways that we can integrate these methods to get different outcomes in our body and in our thought process and our emotions. And, in Chinese philosophy, they call the balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire side of the breath, and learning how to use the water and fire side of the breath to get these different emotional and mental outcomes. An example of the water side of the breath or the yin side of the breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, you will notice that their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And that's the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. So, if we want to emulate this more yin style of energy in our body and in our meditations or our resets or whatever we're doing, we can lengthen the inhale, maybe have soft retentions at the end of the inhale and shorten the exhale. This will help bring that energy inward. And it's very good for distressing and coming out of a panic attack or anxiety if we're experiencing any of these things. And so this would be an example of how we would use that yin side of the breath. Then there's the yang side of the breath, and this is more aggressive. It's the exhale. It's maybe putting tension or maybe making the breath audible. If you ever watch any athletes or fighters, a lot of times they'll use their voice, they'll use that exhale side to help build up and generate energy. If you ever have to pick up something heavy or push your car, your natural instinct is use that exhale to help build that strength, right? And so this is an example of how we can use the breath to balance our overall energetic state. We go through the day with emotional ups and downs. Everybody does. Some people are like a roller coaster. Others of us may be a little bit more balanced. But however you are, when you notice and start to become aware of these imbalances, you can use the breath when you get excited to bring you back down, or you start feeling a little depleted, you can use the breath to bring you back up. And it's easy when you notice the imbalance from the beginning, but if your sensitivity isn't heightened and you're at the bottom of a valley or the top of a peak, it's a lot harder to get those adjustments. And so this is an example of regulating the breath. Then we have regulating the mind. Regulating the mind is, again, a lifelong journey and a very deep practice. In We talked a little bit about how we get distracted in meditation and we're using our focus to come back to center. We do this all day, every day. Something happens to us, and a lot of times one negative thing will happen or one distraction will happen. It'll lead to another and another, and eventually we're down this path that's just snowballing and causing a lot of conflict. There's this story that I love to tell about these two monks who are walking down a dirt road after a rainstorm, and they come up against to this big huge puddle, and on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful lady, and she's standing there in a white dress crying. And the older monk looks across the puddle and he says, "Ma'am, is everything okay? Can I help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, and if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." And so he rolls up his pant legs and he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, and walks her to the other side, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk, they're walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious and he says, we're not supposed to touch ladies, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down at him and he says, "You're still thinking about that lady? I left her back there at the puddle." And it's just a simple example of, we do that all of the time. And so, how can we make these shifts to not get stuck down these negative paths and spend our day in worry and distraction? And so, meditation is one of those things that helps us come back to center and live from a more positive state. Then there's regulating the energy. Regulating the energy is easy to do if we have reached a level of competence in regulating the body, regulating the breath, and regulating the mind. And there's different energetic circulations we do with different meditations. And we could talk for hours just on different energetic circulations in the body, but that's what I mean when I say that. Then there's regulating the spirit, which is the last regulation. And regulating the spirit has many different levels. If you talk to a very serious monk or a qigong master or somebody who's living the lifestyle of meditation, their ultimate goal is to reach enlightenment. This is what we mean by regulating the spirit. Now, I personally have been training in the meditative arts for a long time. I've spent my whole career traveling around the world training with numerous different practitioners, and I have never once met a meditation practitioner that I would say has their third eye opened. So I don't know if that is possible in today's society. I feel like with all of our distractions and everything that's going on, I feel like if there ever was somebody that is out there, they wouldn't be in the city. They would be living up in the mountains somewhere, and they probably would never hear about them because if you did, there would be too much to distract them.
It's very interesting hearing you talk about all these things because so at your academy there, you teach people meditation, you teach them martial arts and all that sort of stuff. And I'm really happy to hear all that sort of stuff going together. And I'm curious what percentage of your clients there are male?
I would say 60 to 65% are male.
Wow. Okay. And are they mainly doing martial arts or are they also doing studying meditation as well?
So in our so we have four programs here. We have our striking program, which is like boxing and Muay Thai, our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, and our JKD and Eskrima program, and then our meditative art program. In the meditative art program, I would say it's probably a little more like 50-50 male, female.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that's, to me, that's a wonderful statistic. I've been to not martial arts type things, but like energy trainings and things like that, and you sort of usually come in at 5 to 10% male, and the rest are all female. That's in Australia and the US where I've been. So yeah, it's great that you attract that sort of number of men into that sort of thing.
I think one of the things that helps men be interested is the idea of push hands and learning how to physically use yielding in a practice because one, it's kind of fun, but it's also can be a little bit competitive as well. And so I think they're drawn to that. And then that's kind of a great avenue to help them get into more of that softer side of life, right? I think some of the people who need it the most are some of the men that come in here that are stiff as two by fours and they don't even know it. I have a longtime student of mine who started with me when he was about 55 years old. His name's Bill, great guy. He is now in his mid 80s, still coming here after 30 years. And when he first started with me, he was literally as stiff as a two by four. And, he came in wanting to learn sword fighting. And after a couple sessions, I'm like, Bill, we should do some Tai Chi and meditation. And he's obviously hooked. He's stayed here for 30 years, but it changed his whole physiology and his life in so many ways. And ended up being just a great guy and a great addition to the family here at the academy.
Yeah. So I'm curious with some of your longer term students like that, and I know wouldn't you obviously observe things like you just shared then. Um, for me, when they meditate and that sort of thing, or doing qigong, and I only say qigong because I'm familiar with doing that to a limited degree. I'm not familiar with any of the other martial arts except for my 18 months of karate, which I was just there being a good dad. I wasn't there. If it wasn't for taking the kids along, I wouldn't have been there. I admit. Um, I'm just curious. Have you, at all, in any way, noticed the men as if they are getting into the meditation, potentially developing their intuition a bit more?
For sure. I think the meditative arts helps you tap into your core. And what I mean by that is I feel like in today's society, we're forced to oftentimes wear a mask. You don't want to maybe show your true feelings or you don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. So you hide kind of what you want to say or whatever. And we get so used to doing this and feel like we're wearing this mask all the time that it just becomes who we are. And then eventually you start looking at yourself in the mirror and you're still wearing that mask. Meditation helps us let that mask go and really stay connected with who we are. And I feel like to develop higher levels of intuition and sensitivity and awareness, you have to be able to let that mask go. And I don't know a better way than to integrate the meditative arts into your life.
Yeah, yeah. I know from reading your book, I could really get it. Like why, like if I was living near your studio, I think I'd probably be attending. Realize because I've seen places where men go, to work out and do stuff like that, and to do a little bit of spiritual training too. But it's all, to me, for me, it's a bit too much rah rah macho. We're wrestling, and that's what it's really about. For some reason, I'm just extremely passive. I'm not a fighter, and I got cornered once when I was 8 in a strange place by 6 other guys who were like my age or a little older, and they surrounded me and said you're going to have to fight your way out of here, and da, da, da. And I was, it was not a good place for me, being very passive. when they were all sort of looking at each other, smirking, out of nowhere, I just punched the biggest one of them in the stomach and ran through the gap and bolted and got out of there. And that came out of nowhere. But that's the only time in my life I've ever thought about swinging a hand to injure anyone. From reading your book and what's you've got going there, it's very interesting to me. And learning the yielding and using as little energy to get the biggest outcome there. And I think the world could learn so much from that. We talk about climate crisis and, all this sort of stuff. If we could just balance a lot of areas of our life out with use the least amount of energy to get the greatest outcome, just in many, many areas in life of how much energy we're producing on the planet to manufacture things, et cetera, or to run our lives. Turn the light off, turn the aircon off when you're not using it. Just, like, because if you had to sit there and pedal a bike to make that light come on or to make that aircon run, you'd probably turn it off and stop pedaling when you didn't need it on, and if we ran our lives by that sort of philosophy, yeah, I could see great benefits of it. So I'm curious with meditation, what's your thoughts on how often we should do it and for how long when we do it?
I think you should do it every day. It's one of those things where, you don't need to retire to a cave and be a monk and meditate for the rest of your life. But if you just meditate for 20 minutes a day and integrate some of these active practices, you can really get a lot of positive momentum. And, when new students come into the academy here and they're looking into our meditation program, our Tai Chi program, I'll tell them within 5 minutes of them walking in the door that to be a student here, we're expecting you to practice 20 minutes a day on your own. And if you don't have that kind of desire to take on that practice, then this probably isn't the right place for you. And now I might turn away business doing that, but, and he told me something that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to get good at boxing, you should start doing Tai Chi and meditation. And at the time, I was this young kid who thought Tai Chi was for old people in the park. And how is this going to help me? And it just turned my whole career path around. It changed so many things in my life. And through the years, I've had thousands of students come through the academy, and I've seen it positively influence hundreds of lives. And that's kind of why I've been so passionate about writing these last couple books and creating this online program. I want everybody that comes here to be successful and to see benefits from the practice. And if they're not willing to invest 20 minutes a day into themselves, then there's a problem. And it goes beyond just the meditation, and the Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. I totally believe in that philosophy. And it's, you got to have some time for yourself every day where you can shut off your phone, you can shut off the audio, and you can just reconnect with who you are. And if you feel like you're too busy to do that, I think it's about time to maybe evaluate your situation and maybe readjust your priorities, because really there's so much benefit that can come from a practice like that. Once you have that ritual practice, then integrating some of these active practices, which are very easy to do and don't take any time, will really help push that along. And I feel like if you could do that religiously, you're doing every day, you're doing that 20-minute practice, you're integrating some active practices 4 or 5 times throughout the day. If you do that every day for a year, I would bet that 97, 98 out of 100 people that did that would do this practice for the rest of their life, because they would see so many benefits that they would never want to stop.
Yeah, I believe that men who are in touch with their intuition, and they get in touch with it through doing sort of things that you're talking about, are at the happier end of the scale with their lives than, those who are down on themselves, grumpy, down on everybody, everything's, the world's awful, da 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 da. It's very few of those people that are practicing things you're talking about. They
Yes.
just, yeah, it's happy life. You've got to take some time for yourself. You've got to go within, and yeah, and I believe helps you see a much bigger picture of life, and you can see very easily and quickly beyond what appears to be a problem that's occurred for you at the time. And that's my take on it. Why I would encourage people to undertake the practices you're talking about, and because to me ultimately it helps develop your intuition as part of. And intuition's not the be all and end all. It's just another tool in the box, like you're offering people multiple different tools, and they seem to complement each other and flow together, and generally make our lives a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I one of my teachers a long time ago told me that we get what we focus on, and if everything you focus on is problem this and this problem and that problem, you're going to have a miserable life. But why is it that the next guy right next to you is doing the exact same life as you, working at the same place, have the same family, live in the same neighborhood, and he's happy about everything? If you choose to be happy, you can be happy. If you choose to focus on the negative things, that's what's going to happen. And I feel like if you get in the habit of doing one or the other, that's what's going to show you success. If you want to see that, and in order to make those changes and those shifts, you need to improve your sensitivity and your awareness so we can make those shifts before they gain too much negative momentum. And this kind of a practice will help you start developing that sensitivity. You start going down that negative path. Up, I need to correct. You're always making corrections. We all are. Nobody's perfect. Nobody thinks positive thoughts all the time. But how many times do you have a negative thought and it leads to 30 other negative thoughts? Or are you sharp enough to say, hey, that's not a path I want to follow. Let's get back to center. And that's kind of how the idea of working on the mental side of the training with meditation helps you stay focused.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about your free book, but I believe you have two books. What's the other one themed on?
Well, you mentioned the audio or the download for the book. But we also have, if you want a hard copy of the book, you could go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and get a physical copy of the book for free. You just pay for shipping and handling. So that's another way if you are interested. I don't like reading on a computer, so I like having a book in my hand. And so that's a way you could get a copy of the book. And also at the Yielding Warrior, we have our online program, and you could check that out for a couple weeks and see if that's something that might help you put together a meditation practice. My other book you could find on Amazon. It's How to Meditate. It's a more of a it's a lot smaller book. I think it's around 120 pages, and it just talks about some of the meditation philosophy.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Well, that's be really helpful. I mean, to me, I'm just the size of the book. The other one sounds like your meditation book sounds half the size of that one.
Yeah.
So you're giving away the bigger, better one.
It's the one that I've put my heart into, and I
Yeah.
want people to see it. It's like I feel like there's so much good in there, and I feel like if they read that and they connect with it, that they'll be interested in learning more, and then they can find me through my website, and that's how I'll break even.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Yeah. I hear. So I've got a kind of a deep sort of question. Some people find it real easy to answer. Some people have a bit of a contemplate for a few seconds. If your microphone that you're sitting in front of right now is connected to all 8.1 billion people on the planet, and you knew that they wouldn't judge, blame, or shame you for anything you said, what would you say to them?
I would tell them to live in consideration and stay aware of what they say to themselves and to other people.
Good advice. Very good advice. Yeah, bet that awareness of what we're saying and how we're saying it. Yeah. I'm going to have in the show notes here all of your contact details, like the web address and things like that, where people can either download the free book, or I'm glad you mentioned that you actually will send people a hard copy for free if they pay for shipping. So all that info will be in there. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to bring up or mention?
Yeah, so on my website as well at theyieldingwarrior.com, we also have a teacher training program. So if you own a yoga studio or a martial arts studio, or maybe you're a life coach and you're interested in learning how to develop a program for the meditative arts, or maybe if you're a coach, how to integrate these lessons into your clients, there's that avenue there as well.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so that's been super good info. I've learnt, and I'm sure those listening will realize now, like, the advantages of meditation. And I'm impressed that you've got such a high percentage of men involved in your programs, and you've been going for a really long time. Because to me, it's, intuition and men have taken a long time to mesh together, and all the things that you do, whether I think those men realize it or not, are probably developing their intuition and bringing it bringing it on without them realizing it, which is, that subtle way like that, where they're becoming more sensitive. They're, intuiting things and knowing things, and that sort of stuff. And with what you're teaching, it's probably helping them interpret a little bit more as well, with helping to study the breath and their bodies, and that. So it's yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I know those listening I'm presuming will enjoy, hopefully, tapping into the Yielding Warrior book, because that's got some really good information in there as well. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you. Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.